The subtle game of the ego, beloved ones, the ego is the greatest magician the human mind has ever known. It can play tricks so delicate, so invisible, that you may live an entire life without realizing you are only following its instructions. The ego never appears in its naked form. It hides. It protects itself through layers of identity, belief, and emotion. And when one layer becomes old or ineffective, the ego simply creates another. It is endlessly creative in its illusion. When you begin to see that anger exhausts you, the ego says, leave anger, it is not worthy of a spiritual person like you. When you begin to see that greed creates suffering, the ego whispers, let go of greed, you are born for higher things. It pretends to support your growth, but only because it wants to move into the new house you are building. It wants to remain the master, even if the house becomes spiritual. The ego changes language, but not intention. It changes clothing, but not nature. It is like a thief who becomes a policeman just to protect the crime from being discovered. The ego will tell you, be spiritual, not because it cares for truth, but because the idea of being spiritual gives it a fresh and shining identity. It becomes proud of purity, proud of meditation, proud of prayer. And the moment pride enters, spirituality evaporates. The ego has a very refined way of hiding inside your virtues. It will say, look, you are humble, and if you are not alert, you will even take pride in humility. It will say, you forgive so easily, and suddenly forgiveness becomes a certificate of superiority. You might not shout it out loud, but the inner noise remains the same. I am better, and this silent comparison is the food of the ego. Many people come to the world of spirituality not to lose themselves, but to redefine themselves. They drop their worldly names, but keep the sense of specialness. They renounce material possessions, but hold tightly to psychological possessions. They sit in meditation, but in their inner world they are still measuring, still competing, still dreaming of becoming something extraordinary. They may not desire money anymore, but they desire enlightenment in the same greedy way. The ego knows no difference between the marketplace and the monastery. It can live anywhere. It can sit in the temple with the same comfort with which it sits in the casino. It does not care about the place, it only cares about its survival. And spirituality for many becomes the most comfortable place for the ego to hide, because nobody suspects it there. The world applauds a spiritual ego. Society respects it. People bow to it. It receives admiration disguised as devotion. But the ego is still the same. It has not transformed, only shifted the scenery. It has painted itself with sacred colors, but the canvas underneath remains unchanged. Until you see this with crystal clarity, you will continue to mistake ego for enlightenment and decoration for transformation. My own encounter with this illusion. When I was a young seeker, curious and rebellious, I watched the mind very closely. I was not interested in borrowed knowledge. I wanted to see with my own eyes how the mind behaves. And slowly, silently, I began to notice a strange phenomenon. The more I moved inward, the more the ego also tried to follow me. It did not want to be left behind. It wanted to accompany me on every step of the journey. There were moments when I would sit alone under a tree, watching my breath, feeling the immense silence spread around me. And then a thought would arise, soft and gentle. You are not like others. You are special. You are becoming spiritual. The moment this thought appeared, the silence would vanish. My very own mind had thrown a stone into the still lake within me, and the ego would smile from behind the curtain, pretending to be my friend, pretending to guide me. I remember many such moments, times when I felt a deep compassion, and immediately the mind would whisper, see how compassionate you are. Times when a fragrance of meditation arose, and instantly the ego would step in, you are progressing faster than others. At first, I believed these thoughts. The ego has a sweet voice, it knows how to seduce. It does not come with violence. It comes like a gentle breeze, like a flattering friend. But slowly, as my awareness deepened, I began to see the trick. I realized that the ego had no interest in truth. It had no desire for liberation. It was only using the language of spirituality to feel more important. This discovery made me laugh, and that laughter was a turning point. When you can laugh at your own ego, a door opens. The laughter creates distance. It shows you that you are not the voice pretending to guide you. This is why I often say a sense of humor is essential on the spiritual path. Without it, you will take your ego too seriously. You will nourish it unknowingly. You will protect it in the name of holiness. But if you can laugh at your own grand ideas, your own spiritual ambitions, your own inner decorations, then suddenly the ego begins to lose power. It cannot survive in the light of playful awareness. There was a time when the mind tried to convince me that I had achieved something. It said, "You have understood what others have not." And I simply watched. In that watchfulness, the thought disappeared. Then another came, "You are moving closer to enlightenment." Again I watched. It dissolved like a cloud in the sky. Slowly the ego realized that I was no longer available for its games. This inner journey taught me something profound. The ego does not leave you when you meditate. It does not leave you when you pray. It leaves only when you become a witness, only when you are able to see its subtle movement without fear and without fascination. And this is what I share with you now. Not as a doctrine, not as a philosophy, but as something lived, tasted, understood. I have walked through the same illusions. I have been deceived by the same voice. And if I can expose it within myself, you can expose it within you. The moment you see the inner trickster, you begin to wake up. And in that awakening, the ego slowly bows down because it knows its time is over. The ego's desire to feel superior. Beloved ones, to understand why your ego wants you to be spiritual, you must first understand its deepest hunger. The ego survives only through comparison. It cannot live without the idea of being better, higher, wiser, or more special than someone else. The ego is like a shadow. It cannot exist on its own. It can exist only in contrast. The moment comparison disappears, the ego begins to starve. This is why the ego is so attracted to spirituality. In the ordinary world, people compare through wealth, through success, through beauty, through strength. But when a seeker begins to turn away from these outer measurements, the ego does not immediately die. It simply finds a more refined way to continue its existence. It says, if you cannot be superior in the world, be superior in heaven. If you cannot dominate in society, dominate in virtue. The same poison enters a new bottle. I have seen people renounce everything, but still carry the ego inside like a hidden treasure. They may wear simple clothes, they may eat simple food, they may speak softly, but inside they hold a very subtle pride. They feel, look how humble I am. Look how spiritual I am. Look how far above others I have risen. And this invisible superiority is far more dangerous than the ordinary kind, because it wears the mask of purity. The ego loves masks. In the marketplace, it wears one mask. In the temple, it wears another. But the hunger underneath remains unchanged. Even in meditation, the ego wants to be the best meditator. Even in prayer, it wants to be the most devoted. Even in compassion, it wants to be the most selfless. Observe the absurdity. The ego is ready to be proud of selflessness. It is ready to be proud egolessness. This is the ultimate trick. I have met monks who lived in caves for years, yet their ego was as sharp as a sword. They thought they were the chosen ones. I have met scholars who memorized scriptures, yet their ego became heavier than the scriptures themselves. And I have met devotees who believed their devotion made them special in the eyes of God. It did not realize that even God cannot enter where ego stands at the door. The ego always wants to reach the top. Even if the mountain is made of spiritual ideas, it wants a throne. Even if the throne is in heaven, it wants recognition, even if the recognition comes from within its own imagination. It thrives on the feeling of being extraordinary, and spirituality provides the richest soil for this fantasy to grow. But remember, true spirituality begins only when this desire to be superior disappears. When you no longer want to be better than others. When you no longer want to be a saint. When you no longer want to achieve anything at all. The real journey starts when you drop all ambition, both worldly and otherworldly, when there is no desire to rise higher. A different kind of height reveals itself, a height that does not belong to the ego, a height that is not achieved but discovered. It is as natural as breathing, as simple as silence. It is the height of being yourself without comparison. And in that simplicity, the ego has no place to stand. What true spirituality actually means, beloved ones, true spirituality is not something you add to your life like a new ornament. It is not a robe you wear. It is not a mantra you repeat. It is not an image you create in the eyes of the world. True spirituality is the fragrance that arises when the false drops away. It is not an achievement. It is a discovery. It is not a journey towards something far away. It is a journey back to yourself. The ego says become spiritual, and immediately it gives you goals. Meditate for so many hours, chant so many names, read so many scriptures, perform so many rituals. And in all these goals, the ego finds nourishment. It says, look how disciplined I am, look how pure I have become, look how much progress I have made. But real spirituality is not a project. It cannot be measured. You cannot count your steps toward truth. Truth does not come through effort. Truth comes through effortless awareness. When I speak of true spirituality, I speak of something very simple. It is the ability to witness your mind without becoming lost in it. It is the ability to see your emotions without being dragged by them. It is the courage to stand naked in your own consciousness, without hiding behind beliefs, traditions, or identities. This nakedness is the beginning of freedom. People think spirituality means performing certain rituals or believing certain doctrines. These are only outer forms. They may help for a moment, but they are not the essence. The essence is awareness. When you are aware, even breathing becomes meditation. Walking becomes a prayer. Silence becomes a temple. Life itself becomes a teacher. Awareness brings clarity. And in that clarity, the ego cannot hide. When you watch your thoughts, you begin to see how many are borrowed. You start to see how many of your beliefs come from society, from religion, from parents, from teachers. Slowly you see that very little in you is truly yours. You have been living like a guest in your own being. And with this realization, a new light enters. A new intelligence awakens. This intelligence does not come from outside. It is already within you, but it is covered with layers of conditioning. True spirituality is the art of removing those layers one by one. You do not fight them, you do not condemn them. You simply watch them. And in the warmth of awareness, they melt on their own. When the ego pretends to be spiritual, it makes you rigid, serious, tense. But true spirituality makes you soft, flowing, playful. The truly spiritual person does not carry a heavy moral burden. He moves lightly, like a breeze passing through the trees. His presence is simple, but that simplicity has depth. It has a music that is not created, it is revealed. True spirituality means being utterly yourself without imitation. It means listening to the whisper of your own being. It means dropping the masks that the world has handed to you. And when the last mask falls, what remains is innocence. And in that innocence you find the divine, not as an achievement but as your very nature. A glimpse from my own inner journey. Beloved ones, on my own path I discovered something very simple yet very transformative. I realized early in my seeking that if I fought with the ego, I would only strengthen it. The ego feeds on resistance. It becomes powerful the moment you declare war against it. If you push it away, it returns through the back door. If you reject it, it hides in your virtues. If you condemn it, it disguises itself as a saint. So I learned not to fight the ego, but to observe it. There were moments when deep silence would descend upon me, a silence so alive, so vibrant, that even the beating of the heart felt like a distant echo. In those moments, I would feel the presence of something vast and real. But the ego would immediately try to take credit. It would say, "See, you have achieved something rare." The moment that thought appeared, the silence would disappear like a bird frightened by sudden noise. Again and again this happened. So I began to study these moments. I watched them the way a scientist observes a phenomenon. I watched how the ego would quietly enter whenever there was a taste of truth. I watched how it would steal the fragrance of meditation and claim it as its own. And slowly, the very act of watching changed everything. Awareness is a medicine, the most powerful medicine in existence. I would sit silently, and instead of resisting the ego, I allowed it to show itself. I let it speak. I let it reveal its desires, its anxieties, its ambitions. And as I observed, I started seeing that the ego was never the enemy. It was simply an unconscious movement of the mind. It had no real substance. It was made of thoughts, comparisons, memories, fears. Like a shadow, it existed only in the absence of light. One evening, sitting by the river, something profound became clear. I realized that the ego survives only when I take it seriously. When I treated it like a problem, it became a mountain. But when I watched it with a playful awareness, it dissolved like a small cloud. That day I laughed at myself with such freedom that even the river seemed to laugh with me. And in that laughter, a weight dropped from my being. I learned that meditation is not something that destroys the ego through effort. It is something that reveals the ego's non-existence through awareness. You simply see what is real and what is imaginary, and the imaginary disappears by itself. As the years passed, the ego became more and more transparent. It would still arise, but now it had no power to deceive. I could see its movements even before they fully appeared. It was like watching a child's game, harmless, innocent, almost amusing. And in this lightness, a new quality entered my life, a silence that did not come and go, a presence that was not disturbed by thoughts, a freedom that was not dependent on circumstances. This is why I say to you, from my own lived experience, do not fight your ego, watch it. Do not try to destroy it, understand it. In understanding, it disappears. And in its disappearance, you will taste a freedom that is not an attainment but your original nature. The invitation to look within, beloved ones, now I invite you to look within, not as a duty, not as a commandment, not as a spiritual task that must be accomplished. I invite you the way one invites a friend to sit under the shade of a tree, to enjoy the breeze, to listen to the birds. This journey inward is not a journey of effort. It is a relaxation, a softening, a melting. Do not try to become spiritual. The very desire to become spiritual is the ego's last disguise. Instead, simply become aware. Awareness is enough. Awareness is the seed from which true transformation blossoms. Sit silently, close your eyes, and watch the movement of your mind. Thoughts will come, waves will rise, emotions will knock at your door, but do not interfere. Do not judge. Do not push anything away. Be a witness. In the beginning, it may seem difficult because you have lived your whole life identified with the mind. But slowly, as you practice watchfulness, a distance appears. A small space opens between you and your thoughts. In that space, freedom begins. And this freedom is not something you create. It is something that has always been waiting for you beneath the noise. You look within without judgment, without ambition, without the desire to reach some spiritual height. Something beautiful starts happening. you begin to see that the mind is just a mechanism, a process, a flow of conditioned patterns. It is not you. You are the one who watches, the mind. You are the open sky, not the passing clouds. Once this clarity arises, even for a moment, the ego loses its foundation. The ego depends on your identification. It depends on your belief that you are the mind, that you are your thoughts, your memories, your achievements. When you step back and watch, the ego cannot stand. It fades, it becomes transparent, it loses its authority. I have always been amazed by this simple truth. Awareness requires no effort. You do not have to create it. It is your nature. You were born with it. A child looks at the world with pure awareness, without interpretation. Slowly, society teaches the child to think, to judge, to analyze, to compare. And in this process, the natural awareness becomes clouded. But it is never destroyed. It only needs to be uncovered. So I invite you to rediscover this natural state. Sit in silence for a few minutes every day, not to force meditation, but to allow meditation. Let it come to you like the fragrance of a flower that opens by itself. Do not try to improve yourself. Do not try to become holy. These efforts only strengthen the ego. Instead, let go of all effort. Relax into your own presence. When you become a watcher, life becomes a miracle. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. A simple breath becomes a doorway to the divine. A moment of silence becomes a window into infinity. This is the real spirituality. It is not about temples or scriptures, rituals or renunciation. It is about discovering the living presence within you. And when you touch this presence, even for a single breath, something eternal opens. Something that cannot be shaken by circumstances. Something that does not depend on achievements. Something untouched by the ego's games. This presence is your true nature. It is freedom, it is peace, it is love. I invite you to enter this space. Not tomorrow, not in some distant future, now. This very moment. Close your eyes and look within. The door is already open. You have only to walk through